He was mocked for dreaming big in a world that expected him to stay small. But when she saw who sat behind the CEO desk, her smile disappeared. It was one of those golden afternoons where the sun blanketed everything in warmth, and the laughter of children danced through the air like wind chimes in a soft breeze. The courtyard of Lincoln Middle School buzzed with energy. Kids huddled in groups, trading Pokemon cards, bouncing basketballs, and chattering about weekend plans. The end-of-day bell had rung, but no one seemed in a hurry to leave. Summer was inching closer, and the mood was light. But on the far edge of the courtyard, beneath the only tree that cast a decent shade, sat Derrick, a quiet boy with thoughtful eyes and worn sneakers. His clothes were always clean, but noticeably faded, and his backpack bore the marks of too many school years. In his lap, balanced carefully, was a thick notebook, its cover frayed and corners bent from use. Inside, lines of pencil danced across the page's futuristic skylines, sweeping bridges and towering buildings no one had ever seen before. Derrick didn't care for recess much. He didn't chase soccer balls or compete to see who could shout the loudest. His mind was elsewhere, somewhere above the clouds, in steel beams and glass panels that reflected the sky. His dream was quietly ambitious, tucked between graphite lines and unspoken wishes. Across the yard, Emily stood in the center of a laughing circle. Her hair shimmered in the light, and her voice was the loudest in any room or playground. She was the kind of girl teachers smiled at and classmates wanted to be around. Her backpack had designer labels, and her shoes sparkled like they were made of something special. She had never spoken to Derrick directly, but she'd noticed him always scribbling in that notebook, always alone. That afternoon, the last class of the day was a kind of fun activity. Dream Board Day, their teacher called it. Each student would stand up and share what they wanted to be when they grew up. Most answers were predictable. "I want to be a doctor," said a girl with glasses. "Football player," one of the taller boys chimed in. "Fashion designer," said Emily, flipping her hair and earning a round of approving giggles. Then it was Derrick's turn. He stood slowly, gripping his notebook like it was armor. His voice was soft, but steady. "I want to be an architect," he said, "and one day I'm going to own my own firm." There was a pause, a beat of silence before the storm. A few kids snorted. A few others looked confused. And then came the laugh dot. It was Emily. Not a polite giggle, but a loud, unfiltered burst of amusement. Her eyes locked on Derrick's shoes scuffed at the front, the soles almost peeling. "You?" she said through laughter. "An architect? You can't even afford better shoes." The room exploded in laughter. Even the teacher, caught off guard, struggled to regain control. Derrick's ears burned, but he didn't flinch. He didn't cry or argue. He simply sat down and quietly closed his notebook, like he was sealing away a part of himself. But if anyone had looked closely, they might have noticed something strange in his eyes. Not shame, not anger, but resolve. A tiny spark that refused to go out, even in the wind of humiliation. The class moved on. A moment passed. But for Derrick, something changed that day. Because in that instant, when the world laughed and tried to shrink his dream, he made a silent promise to himself. "Day, I will build something so beautiful, even she will have to walk through it." The laughter still echoed in Derrick's ears as he stepped out of the school gates. It wasn't just the sound. It was the way they looked at him. Like his dream was a joke. Like he had stepped outside the boundary of what someone like him was allowed to want. But he didn't say a word. He hadn't back in the classroom, and he didn't know. His silence wasn't weakness. It was something else. Something heavier. Something that sat in his chest like a stone. The spring afternoon had cooled. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the cracked sidewalks of his neighborhood. Trash cans sat crooked on the curbs. A broken tricycle lay abandoned in a patch of dead grass. Paint peeled off boarded windows like old scabs. It was the kind of place that people drove through with their windows rolled up and their doors locked. But this was Derrick's world. Not glamorous, not easy, but real. He didn't walk quickly, he never did. He moved with a thoughtful pace, like he was always halfway in a daydream, as if his feet touched pavement, but his eyes were always searching for something above it. Even now, even after what had happened, he glanced up at the buildings, tired old brick houses stacked close together, and imagined what could replace them. Green spaces, light, angles that defied gravity, spaces that didn't just shelter people but lifted them. He arrived home just as the streetlights buzzed to life. Their apartment was on the second floor of a weathered duplex. The stairs creaked. The screen door stuck. Inside, the wallpaper was yellowing, and the kitchen faucet dripped, but it smelled like home-like old books, laundry detergent, and something warm on the stove. His mother, Monica, was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of rice and beans. She was still in her scrubs from her job at the care facility. Her back ached. Her feet throbbed. But her smile, when she saw Derrick, was effortless. "Hey, baby," she said, glancing at him. "How was school?" Derrick hesitated. For a moment, he thought about saying fine and disappearing into his room like usual. But something in him cracked. He dropped his backpack by the door and slumped into the old armchair in the corner of the kitchen. The fabric was worn smooth from years of use. He stared at the floor. "They laughed," he said quietly. Monica turned down the stove, wiping her hands on a towel as she moved to sit across from him. "Who did?" "Everyone," he said. "When I said I wanted to be an architect." "They laughed," Emily said. "She said I can't even afford shoes, let alone build buildings." Monica's face didn't twist in anger. It didn't harden with shock. Instead, it softened. "Oh, baby." She reached across the small table and took his hand. But Derrick wasn't crying. He wasn't even angry. His eyes were calm, almost blank. And somehow, that hurt Monica more. After a moment, she squeezed his hand gently and said, "Let me tell you something about dreams, Derrick." He looked up at her. "Dreams don't care where you come from. They don't care what your shoes look like or how loud someone laughs. All they care about is how much you believe in them. You hear me?" He didn't respond, but his eyes didn't drop. She continued, "They'll laugh today, maybe tomorrow, but you just keep building, keep drawing, keep learning, and believe louder than they laugh. That's how you win." Derrick nodded slowly, the weight in his chest starting to shift, just a little. Later that night, the apartment was quiet. Monica had gone to bed early, exhausted from her double shift. The only sounds were the ticking of the wall clock and the occasional creak of the building settling into its bones. Derrick sat at the kitchen table with his notebook open in front of him. A single desk lamp illuminated the pages, casting warm light on half-finished sketches. His pencil moved slowly, deliberately. He wasn't just drawing now, he was designing pieces of a future no one believed in except him. A school with glass, walls and gardens. A home with open skylights and curved beams. A community center shaped like a circle, so no one ever felt like they were sitting at the edges. With each line, he silenced the echo of laughter. With each detail, he laid another brick in the foundation of the life he saw for himself. He didn't know how long he sat there. Hours, maybe. Long enough for the silence to feel like peace instead of punishment. And when he finally closed the notebook and crawled into bed, he whispered something to himself in the dark, a vow so soft it barely reached the walls around him. "I'll show them. All of them." Years slipped by like pages in Derrick's notebook quietly, persistently, but always moving forward. The boy who once walked home beneath cracked sidewalks and laughter he couldn't erase had become a young man with calloused hands and weary eyes, but a fire still burning in his chest. The world never made it easy. At 17, while most of his classmates were going to parties and chasing social media likes, Derrick was mopping the floors of a hardware store at night. He spent his weekends buried in architectural textbooks borrowed from the public library books that were 3 editions out of date, but still filled with enough knowledge to feed his hunger. He drew on scrap paper, napkins, the backs of receipts, anything he could get his hands on. He applied for scholarships, dozens of them. Some doors opened, most slammed shut. But every no was met with a deeper determination. His fingers grew sore from typing personal essays, tailoring applications, revising drafts late into the night. He got into a state university, not Ivy League, not prestigious, but it had a small architecture program and enough financial aid to make it barely possible. He worked 2 jobs to stay afloat: janitorial work in the early mornings, tutoring freshmen in math at night. Some days, he'd go 14 hours without a real meal. He kept granola bars in his backpack like currency, but he never stopped drawing. When others gave up on the all-nighters, Derrick stayed until the lights flickered off in the studio. While his classmates complained about the workload, Derrick devoured every assignment like it was an opportunity. He didn't just want to pass. He wanted to build something lasting, something impossible to ignore. And yet, the world still noticed where he came from more than where he was going. Meanwhile, Emily floated. College came to her like a gift basket, delivered, packaged, and padded. She wore designer sweaters in classrooms and studied only when her social calendar allowed. Her parents had donated to the alumni fund, so doors opened before she even knocked. She wasn't unkind, exactly, just unaware. Unaware of what it meant to sacrifice sleep for tuition. Unaware of the bitterness that rejection letters carried. When the rejection wasn't about grades, but about who they assumed you were. Emily majored in business, took summer trips to Europe to find herself, partied through internships her father arranged for her at marketing firms. She barely remembered the names of. Her resume looked perfect, but none of it ever challenged her. None of it shaped her. Back in Derrick's world, the real education didn't come from textbooks. It came from silence. From rejections that didn't say, "You're not good enough," but rather, "You're not the right fit." He had graduated top of his class with a portfolio that stunned professors. His final project, an eco-housing development designed for underserved neighborhoods, earned standing ovations at the senior showcase. Still, the emails came back cold. "We've decided to move in a different direction. Your work is impressive, but we're looking for someone with a different background. Unfortunately, we've chosen a candidate with more cultural alignment." He knew what that meant. He didn't have the right handshake, the right last name, the right zip code. One afternoon, defeated and down to his last $80, Derrick stood outside a mid-size firm downtown, dressed in a suit 3 years too old and shoulders too tight. He had already been turned down by 7 firms that week. But something about this place, it didn't look sleek. It looked real, like it had stories in its walls. He walked in anyway. The receptionist barely glanced at him. The assistant manager told him they weren't hiring. But as he was walking out, someone stopped him. "Hey," the voice was deep. Tired, but warm. An older man stood near the elevator, dressed in plain slacks and a button-down with ink stains at the cuff. His beard was peppered with gray, and his eyes sharp and knowing studied Derrick like a blueprint. "You show up like that after 7 rejections?" the man asked. Derrick straightened. "Yes, sir." The man nodded, then smiled. "You hungry?" Derrick hesitated, unsure what he meant. "I don't mean for food. I mean hungry enough to learn. Hungry enough to work when nobody's looking." hungry enough to be told no 100 times and still show up on the 101st. Derrick nodded once. "That's good," the man said, "because that's what it takes." His name was Clarence Jones, a senior architect and one of the founding partners of the firm. He had been watching from the back office when Derrick walked in, saw something in him that reminded him of his own younger self. Clarence asked for Derrick's portfolio. He didn't blink at the worn-out edges or the fact that some of the sketches were clearly redrawn from older pages. He didn't comment on the lack of expensive internships. He just said, "You've got vision. Raw, unshaped, but real." Then he offered him a trial position. 6 months, Clarence said. "Show me what you can do. No promises, just opportunity." To Derrick, it was more than enough. That night, Derrick walked home in the rain. But for the first time in years, he didn't care about getting wet. The city lights shimmered on the pavement like stars reflected in water. He clutched his portfolio to his chest like it was something sacred, because someone had finally seen him, not his past, not his shoes, not his silence, but his future. And that was all he ever needed. The city had changed. Or maybe it was just that Emily had never noticed the cracks until she started falling through them. Gone were the designer bags and first-class vacations. The family business her father's once mighty marketing firm had collapsed under the weight of bad investments and a quiet scandal no one talked about at dinner parties anymore. Their house was sold, the luxury cars repossessed. Her name, once a passkey into every room, now just floated in silence. For the first time in her life, Emily needed a job. Not a passion project. Not an internship arranged by her father's friends. A real job. One that paid real bills. She tugged nervously at the sleeve of her blazer as she stepped out of the elevator and into the polished glass lobby of DL Group. The architecture firm radiated quiet luxury marble floors, minimalist lighting, and art that looked too expensive to understand. It didn't scream for attention. It didn't need to. Power rarely does. She walked to the front desk, heels clicking softly on the floor. "I'm here for the 2 p.m. interview," she said, forcing confidence into her voice. The receptionist, a poised woman with silver-rimmed glasses, checked the schedule. "Miss Carter?" "Yes. You'll be speaking with Mr. Lawson. Conference room. Be just down the hall on your left." Emily nodded, clutching her portfolio. It wasn't impressive, some freelance branding work, a few forgettable projects. Nothing like what she used to dream about. Still, she lifted her chin. Fake it until you make it, she thought. The hallway was quiet, the walls lined with framed sketches of buildings, sleek towers, open-air museums, sustainable housing units that had made headlines. The name DL Group was all over them. She'd done her research. The company had exploded over the last 5 years, praised for its bold yet human-centered designs. The founder was known to be young, visionary, and notoriously private. She pushed open the glass door of conference room B. and froze. Behind the large oak desk sat a man mid-30s, tall, composed, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that fit like it was tailored by the hour. His posture was effortless, and his eyes calm. Derrick met hers without flinching. "Good afternoon," he said smoothly, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Please, have a seat." Emily sat slowly. Something about his voice, it tugged at her memory like a thread caught in a zipper. He opened her resume. His brow lifted slightly, but his expression stayed unreadable. "So, Emily Carter. Degree. In business. Freelanced since graduation. A gap in employment recently?" She cleared her throat. "Yes, my family business didn't survive the last economic downturn." He nodded, flipping a page. "And now you're looking to pivot into a support role, operations, client management, anything available?" "Yes," she said quickly. "I'm open. I'm ready to work hard. He closed the folder. A silence fell. Heavy. Intentional. Something about his eyes? It was unnerving. Not cruel. Just knowing. Then he tilted his head slightly. You don't recognize me, do you? Emily blinked. Her heart skipped. I'm sorry. He leaned forward just a little. Derrick Lawson. She froze. The name hit like cold water. And then the memory rushed in fuzzy at first, then crystal clear. A classroom. A boy with frayed shoes and a quiet voice. A notebook full of dreams. Her laughter. Her words. You, an architect? Her cheeks flushed red. Wait, Derrick? From middle school? He smiled politely. That's me. She sank back in her chair. I didn't know. I mean, wow. An architect, he said, with no trace of arrogance. Just truth. The founder of this firm. Emily looked down at her hands. I'm sorry. I didn't mean. You don't have to apologize, Derrick interrupted gently. That moment, it was years ago. And to be fair, you weren't the only one laughing. She looked up at him. His expression hadn't changed. Calm, measured, but there was something underneath it, a firmness. A quiet boundary, but I do. Remember it, he added, not because it hurt, but because it clarified things, made everything sharper. Emily nodded slowly. You've really done well for yourself. I worked hard, he said. While others doubted, I kept building, brick by brick. Another silenced dot, then Derrick leaned back slightly. Now, about this job, I won't sugarcoat it. It's entry level. You'd be assisting junior project managers, handling client scheduling, admin work. It's not glamorous. I don't care, Emily said quickly. I need this. I need a fresh start. He studied her for a long moment. Then finally, he gave a small nod. All right. You'll start Monday, 8 a.m. sharp. Don't be late. She exhaled more relief than she meant to show. Thank you. Derrick stood and extended his hand. She took it, and as their palms met, she looked him in the eye. I really am sorry, Derrick. He held her gaze. I know. And just like that, the roles had reversed. The boy who once sat alone under a tree, laughed at for dreaming too big, now sat at the head of the table, and the girl who once laughed, now answered to him. The office was nearly empty. The last of the interns had trickled out, the lights dimmed to a softer hue, and the soft hum of evening traffic filtered through the tall windows of DL Group's 12th floor. Emily stood by the glass, arms folded, staring out at the city as the sun dipped behind steel towers. Her heart hadn't stopped racing since the interview. She'd been offered the job. She should have been relieved, grateful even. But something unsettled her, like dust that refused to settle after a long-forgotten room had been opened. Behind her, Derrick stood silently by the conference table, flipping through a file, though his eyes weren't really reading. The air between them buzzed with unspoken history. Finally, Emily turned. Can I ask you something? Derrick looked up. Of course. She hesitated, then took a step closer, her voice softer now. Back in middle school, did that day actually stay with you? I mean, what I said, what I did. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to the window, standing beside her. For a few seconds, they both just looked out at the skyline. Two people shaped by time, success, and regret in different ways. Then he spoke. Yes, he said, voice low. I remember it. Emily's throat tightened. I was a kid. Stupid one. I didn't know how damaging words could be. I thought I was just being funny, going along with the crowd. He turned to face her now, expression unreadable. I believed in that dream, he said. even before I had the words for it. And that day, your laugh, it didn't just sting. It echoed. It followed me. Emily swallowed hard, eyes beginning to glisten. I was wrong. Deeply wrong. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed to say it out loud. I'm sorry. There was no drama in her voice, just quiet sincerity, shaped by the sting of life catching up to her. The old pride in her had cracked long ago, and this was all that remained. A woman trying to make peace with the version of herself she no longer wanted to be. But Derrick didn't meet her with anger. He didn't retreat into coldness or try to make her squirm. Instead, he took a breath and smiled. Emily, he said gently, you weren't the only one who laughed. She blinked. He continued, that day, I went home and drew for hours. Not to prove anyone wrong, at least, not at first, but because it helped me remember who I really was. It made me work harder, study harder, dream deeper. He stepped away from the window and leaned against the table, arms crossed. So no, I don't hate you. I never did. In fact, he paused, then chuckled softly. In a strange way, I should thank you. Emily looked at him, stunned. Thank me? You gave me something real to push against, something solid. And when the world tried to doubt me later, your voice was already familiar. It didn't scare me. It fueled me. There was no spite in his tone, no sarcasm, just truth. And it disarmed her more than any bitterness could have. He picked up a folder, onboarding documents, and handed it to her. You're qualified. Not just because you went to a good school, or because you had a nice resume. I see the fire in your eyes now, the one I had back then. You've tasted failure. You've felt what it's like to fall. That makes people different. Makes them better if they let it. Emily took the folder with both hands, still trying to process the grace she'd just been given. You're hiring me, she said slowly. Not out of pity. He shook his head. Out of belief. A long silence followed. Finally, she asked, and what if people talk? What if they find out I bullied the CEO back in school? Derrick smiled. Let them talk. If anything, it'll show them that people can grow. That second chances exist. That a mistake at 15 doesn't have to define you at 30. Her eyes filled again, but she blinked the tears back. You really mean that? I do. She let out a quiet breath. Then, before she could stop herself, she said, I would have never imagined this. That the boy I laughed at would become the man I look up to. Derrick offered a humble shrug. Life has a way of flipping the script. Another silence, this time not awkward, but full of something different. Respect, understanding, redemption. Finally, Emily extended her hand again, this time without the nervous edge. To second chances, then. He shook it firmly. To second chances. As she left the room with the folder clutched to her chest, she walked not as a woman seeking favor, but as one who had learned. And behind her, Derrick returned to his desk, not with smug satisfaction, but with a quiet pride, because success, he realized, wasn't just about proving people wrong. Sometimes it was about helping them become better, too. Emily's first day at DL Group was a quiet one. No ribbon-cutting ceremony, no grand reintroductions. Just a stack of client files, a company laptop, and a shared desk near the window overlooking the east side of the city. She didn't expect applause. She didn't want it. What she wanted, what she needed, was the chance to earn her place. And so she arrived early. Every morning, often before the office lights were fully on. She stayed late, organizing files no one else wanted to touch. She asked questions, listened more than she spoke, and when she didn't know something, she admitted it and learned quickly. At first, people looked at her curiously. Wasn't she that girl from a fancy school? Wasn't she used to bigger things? But As the days passed, and then weeks, the questions faded. In their place came quiet nods of approval, unspoken acknowledgments from the team that she was one of them now. No shortcuts, no special treatment, just effort. But the biggest transformation wasn't in how they saw her. It was in how she saw others. Emily watched Derrick closely, not to impress him, not anymore, but because she wanted to understand. There was something about the way he moved through the office, calm, present, intentional. He never raised his voice, yet people listened when he spoke. He didn't dominate rooms. He led them by example. One afternoon, Emily stood in the kitchenette, pouring coffee, when she noticed Derrick crouched by the copier, fixing a jam for the intern. No cameras. No audience. Just a boss showing his team. That no task was beneath him. It struck her in a way that left her speechless. She'd grown up in a world that measured worth by titles, cars, and connections. But in this place, character meant more than credentials. And Derrick, he carried more than success. He carried grace. Weeks turned into months. Emily found herself not just adapting, but growing. She no longer avoided difficult conversations or hard feedback. She embraced them. Each lesson carved away the pride she'd once worn like armor, revealing something more grounded underneath. She began mentoring a new hire, Jasmine, a shy black girl fresh out of college who reminded her of a younger Derrick. Emily took the time to explain processes, checked in without being asked, and stood up for her in meetings when others interrupted. It felt right, like she was finally part of the solution, not the problem. One quiet afternoon, Derrick had stepped out to take a call, and Emily was in his office dropping off reports. She hesitated as she glanced around. His space wasn't flashy. A few framed awards lined the shelves. A clean desk. Blueprints rolled into standing holders. And on the highest shelf, nearly hidden between architecture journals and design textbooks, was a thin, worn-out notebook. Her fingers, it's CHED. She shouldn't. But curiosity, coupled with the thread of emotion she'd carried since that day in the conference room, tugged at her. She reached up and gently pulled the notebook down. The cover was soft from use, the corners curled and bent. She opened it slowly. Inside were sketches, dozens of them, some clean and professional, others messy, drawn with the urgency of a mind that couldn't wait for the future to arrive. One page stopped her. A crude drawing of a building, slanted and childlike, but with a note scribbled under it. Someday, I'll build this, and people will know I belonged. Her breath caught. She flipped the pages faster now. Sketch after sketch, libraries, community centers, museums, all labeled with hopeful, handwritten captions. And then she recognized one. Just the drawing, but the actual building. She passed it every day on her way to the office. This wasn't just a notebook. It was prophecy. Tears welled in her eyes. Uninvited. She blinked rapidly, trying to stop them, but one slipped down her cheek anyway. She pressed her hand gently over. The page enclosed the book. There it was, undeniable proof that dreams, mocked in childhood, could take shape in steel and glass. That belief, even when battered, could still build futures. She returned the notebook to its shelf, carefully, like it was sacred. That evening, as she walked out of the building and into the fading gold of the setting sun, Emily felt something new settle into her bones. It wasn't shame, and it wasn't guilt. It was reverence. For the journey, for growth, for second chances. She paused outside the glass doors, turning back to look at the building. Its clean lines, the sustainable design. Features the inscription near the entrance. Built for tomorrow, with dignity for all. She smiled softly, because now she understood what that meant, not just as a slogan, but as a truth lived and breathed inside those walls. Once, she had laughed at a boy's dream. Now, She worked inside it, and she would spend every day making sure she honored it. There's a stillness and reflection that no success can mimic. Months had passed since Emily joined DL Group. The fast-paced rhythm of deadlines, client meetings, and late-night revisions had become her new normal. But today, as she sat quietly at her desk long after the lights dimmed, something pulled her back, not to work, but to memory. She reached into her drawer and pulled out a small sketchbook she'd started keeping, her own version of the notebook she once found on Derrick's shelf. Inside were scribbles of marketing plans, branding ideas, goals, fears, and lessons. But more than anything, it held humility and gratitude. Because when she thought about how she got here, the path wasn't just lined with effort, that it was built on grace. She had been wrong, deeply wrong, and it had taken losing everything she once valued, status, money, privilege, to finally see it, to understand that the world doesn't orbit around pedigree or polished resumes, that real greatness grows quietly, in places people rarely look, like in a boy with torn shoes sketching buildings under a tree. Years ago, Derrick Lawson had been easy to overlook. He didn't demand attention. He didn't walk with arrogance or speak with bravado. His dream didn't glitter. It whispered. And because it whispered, people ignored it. Some mocked it. One girl laughed at it. But dreams? They don't need applause to survive. They just need belief. Sometimes that belief comes from within, carved out of silence and solitude. Sometimes it's shaped by the echo of ridicule. And sometimes it's born in the fire of rejection so hot it forges resilience instead of rage. Derrick had carried that quiet resilience for years. And when the time came, it wasn't noise or revenge that followed him. It was success, measured not by how many people he proved wrong, but by how many people he lifted up, including the very ones who once doubted him. Emily closed her notebook and looked out at the city lights. Below, the world moved: cars, conversations, lives. Everyone chasing something. She thought about the students in classrooms right now, doodling in notebooks with dreams too big for their neighborhoods. She thought about the teenagers being laughed at for saying they want to be CEOs, engineers, astronauts. And she thought about herself, the girl she used to be, the one who giggled because she couldn't imagine a world where someone like Derrick could design anything, let alone change everything. The truth was brutal, but freeing. She had been blind to possibility that didn't wear expensive shoes, blind to brilliance that didn't announce itself loudly, blind to dreams that didn't look like hers. But not anymore. Sometimes the people we dismiss are the very ones rewriting the future behind closed doors. Sometimes the boy you mock for. Dreaming becomes the man with keys to doors you never imagined needing to walk through. And sometimes the most powerful stories aren't the ones about revenge or triumph, but the ones about grace. Because grace, real grace, isn't just forgiving those who once doubted you. It's offering them a ladder when you have every right to walk away. Derrick had done just that, not because he owed her anything, but because he understood something deeper than success, that people can change, that what we laugh at in immaturity can one day humble us in growth. The small dreams we overlook can become the foundations we one day build our lives upon. And so, Emily worked, not out of guilt, not out of shame, but out of purpose, because she now carried more than a job title. She carried a responsibility to see people clearly, to believe in quiet dreams, to listen when others speak from places of hope, not just achievement, and most of all, to never again underestimate someone's vision just because it didn't sparkle with the same polish as hers. One evening, as the office buzzed with celebration over another successful project, Emily stood beside Derrick near the balcony, glasses in hand, watching the sunset streak gold over the skyline. You ever think about that day?" she asked quietly. "Back in school?" He smiled, a knowing kind of smile. "Sometimes, but only to remind myself how far we've come, both of us." She nodded, eyes scanning the horizon. "I think about it too, and I've realized something." "What's that?" She turned to him. "That dreams don't need validation to grow. They just need time. And people who don't give up on them." Derrick clinked his glass lightly against hers. "Exactly. And in that moment on that balcony, in the company built by a boy who once dreamed too loudly for the world's comfort, they both understood some stories aren't about who was wrong, right. They're about who was brave enough to keep going and who was wise enough to learn. Never underestimate someone's dream just because it doesn't look like yours. Greatness often grows in silence, fed by rejection, and revealed in time. And sometimes the ones you mock today may one day be the ones opening doors for you.